Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Captain Callum Smith. We warmly welcome the family of Lieutenant Gilbert Norman Webb Harvey, who are in attendance this evening and watching the live stream. His story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge Mr. Muhammad Herendra, Deputy Defence Minister of the Republic of Indonesia, accompanied by Vice Admiral David Johnston, Vice Chief Defence Force, on behalf of the Chief of Defence Force. Mr. Chris Crozier, Chief Information Officer, Department of Defence, accompanied by Major General Murray Thompson, Head of Information Communications Technology Operations, and Air Commodore Michael Reedy, Commander, Defence Strategic Communications, and the accompanying delegations. We warmly welcome Mr. Dennis Lyons, representing the Naval Association of Australia. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors to the memorial, and students on behalf of Landilo Public School from Landilo, New South Wales. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where family and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Lieutenant Gilbert Norman Webb Harvey. Gilbert Harvey was born on the 15th of January 1902 in the southern Australian town of Pine Point, then known as Nummulawati. The son of James and Mabel Harvey, he went on to work as a farmer. Harvey married in 1928, and he and his wife Amber would have 3 children, Pauline, Joan and Brian. With Pine Point being one of the busiest ports on the Yorke Peninsula, it was perhaps no surprise that Harvey, who had tattoos on both his forearms, had seafaring experience. Following the outbreak of the Second World War in September 1939, the British Admiralty called on its dominions for men to serve in the Royal Navy. In contrast to the relatively quiet period of the Phoney War, the name given to the early period of the war in Europe when there were limited land operations, the Royal Navy had experienced devastating German U-boat and air attacks in the North Atlantic. There were serious concerns about maintaining the adequate number of naval personnel to keep their ships at sea. In what became known as the Yachtsman Scheme, the men of the Royal Australian Navy Volunteer Reserve were recruited through yacht clubs. Harvey, then in his late 30s, was one of the A-class candidates. Men aged between 30 and 40 who possessed a knowledge of navigation or the equivalent required for the Board of Trade Yachtsman Coastal Certificate. A-class candidates were appointed with direct commissions into the Royal Australian Naval Volunteer Reserve as sub-lieutenants. After advertisements were placed in the newspapers of the capital cities in June 1940, roughly 500 Australians went on to serve as yachties. These men saw action in some of the most dangerous naval campaigns of the war, from the battle in the Atlantic to the D-Day landings and the vast Southwest Pacific. They performed convoy escort duties from Malta in the Mediterranean to Murmansk in the Arctic, and had the dangerous duty of rendering mines safe at sea and along the coast of England. The yachties served in all kinds of ships, such as corvettes, destroyers, minesweepers, frigates and cruisers, to commanding the smaller motor gunboats and landing craft. Harvey was mobilised on the 15th of April 1941 and commissioned as a sub-lieutenant into the Royal Australian Navy. After short postings to HMAS Torrens in Adelaide and then HMAS Cerberus, the Navy's primary training facility on the Mornington Peninsula, he transferred to the London depot in May 1941. Here he was attached to the Royal Navy, where he trained the Royal Navy shore establishments HMAS King Alfred, Nimrod, Claverhouse and Calliope. Having been promoted to lieutenant in August 1941, Harvey transferred to Fort St. Angelo, a bastioned fort located at the centre of the Great Harbour of Malta. Originally built in the medieval period as a castle, during the Second World War it garrisoned the British and was commissioned as HMS St. Angelo, also known as a stone frigate. In November 1943, Lieutenant Harvey joined HMS Hythe as the first lieutenant, what is today referred to as the executive officer, who is the second in command of the ship. Hythe was a Bangor-class minesweeper and one of 4 ships that made up the Royal Navy's 14th, 17th Minesweeper Flotilla. The flotilla had arrived in Malta in June 1942 and was responsible for the clearing of the approaches of the Valletta Grand Harbour of mines and conducting minefield lead-throughs for convoys entering the Maltese harbour. On the 9th of October 1943, HMS Hythe and HMS Rye sailed from Malta with a small convoy of about 4 ships and shaped course for Gibraltar. At about 1 a.m, Rye heard an explosion on the far side of the convoy. As it was completely dark, Rye attempted to contact Hythe with a signalling lamp, but could not raise her. Stan Jacques, Rye's leading submarine detector operator, used the sonar to track noises of the sinking ship. These led HMS Rye to a position of disturbed water where Hythe should have been. Hythe had been sunk by an acoustic torpedo fired by a German submarine and sunk in a matter of minutes. Lifebelt lights were soon sighted by Rye's ship's company, and they recovered 12 survivors from the water. Unfortunately, 2 of those survivors died soon after. Among the dead was Lieutenant Gilbert Harvey, who was 41 years old. With no grave but the sea, today he is commemorated on the Plymouth Naval Memorial. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my left, among some 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Lieutenant Gilbert Norman Webb Harvey, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They have no grave at the cruel sea, no flowers laid at their head. A rusting hulk is their tombstone, a fast on the ocean bed. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely waking through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.